It started like any other day, a regular flow of check-ins, checkouts, and minor mishaps to handle at the hotel. My name's Bryn, and I'm the hotel manager. Running a place like this is a busy, non-stop job. Complaints are part of the package, so you learn to stay calm and patient. But today, things took an unexpected turn. I was at the front desk when a man stormed over, clearly upset. He looked sharp, fancy suit, neatly combed hair, the whole polished look. Without a word, he slapped his phone onto the counter and glared at me, his expression intense. The state of my room is unacceptable. Who's in charge here? He snapped, his tone cutting. I put on my best customer service smile, ready to smooth things over.
I'm really sorry about that, I said.
I'm Bryn, the manager. Let me take care of this right away. He still looked irritated, his eyes fixed on me with suspicion. I hope so, he muttered, looking as if he was ready to call someone higher up. What's your name again? Bryn, I repeated calmly. Let's get this sorted. How about I move you to one of our top rooms free of charge to make up for the troubles? He seemed to relax a little at the offer, so I led him to the upgraded room. As we walked, he let out a small sigh, scratching the back of his neck. Sorry for snapping, he said with a slight smile. I've been on the road for weeks, and it's getting to me. My name's Keaton. No worries, Keaton, I replied, trying to keep things light. We all have days like that. Let's just make sure the rest of your stay goes smoothly. I opened the door to one of our best rooms, and when he looked inside, his face lit up. This will do nicely, he said, nodding with satisfaction. The sight of him calming down felt like a relief, and as I handed him his new room keys, we started chatting a bit more. He told me he was a cryptocurrency investor, traveling a lot for work and sometimes just for fun. But he admitted it wasn't as glamorous as it sounded. Can't be easy always being on the road, I said, filling out a bit of paperwork. But hey, at least you get to meet new people all the time, right? He chuckled, his earlier frustration long gone. Yeah, like hotel managers who know how to handle a cranky guest, he said with a grin. I laughed along, feeling like we'd made an unexpected connection. Before heading off to his room, he paused, looking at me thoughtfully. Hey, Bryn, would you want to grab dinner later? I kind of owe you for putting up with me. His invitation caught me off guard, but he seemed genuine, so I agreed. That evening, we ended up having dinner together. It was easy and comfortable. We talked about everything from cryptocurrencies to our favorite pizza toppings. Keaton had a good sense of humor and didn't mind when I vented a bit about the chaotic day I'd had. It was refreshing, and I found myself relaxing more than I had in a long time. After that first dinner, Keaton and I started spending more time together. It wasn't like a typical romance. It felt more real, like we were just two people who understood each other. After my shifts at the hotel, we'd sometimes meet up for a late-night snack or just wander around town, talking until the early hours of the morning. One night, we ended up in a small, cozy bar, the kind where everyone knows each other, and the beer is always cold. We found a quiet corner booth, and the sounds of the bar became a soft hum in the background as we talked. Keaton was peeling the label off his beer bottle, a habit of his when he seemed deep in thought. Bryn, he started, glancing at me with a serious expression. I've seen a lot of places, met a lot of people, but life on the road, it can get lonely. I took a sip of my drink, giving him a sympathetic look. So why keep doing it? Why not settle down? Maybe find a place to call home. He let out a small, dry laugh. Settle down? Do what? Buy a house, get a dog, and mow the lawn on weekends? He asked, rolling his eyes a bit. I chuckled, shaking my head. It doesn't have to be that routine, you know. But I get it. Freedom's hard to give up. We fell into a comfortable silence, both lost in our thoughts. The quiet noise of the bar buzzed around us, and I found myself opening up, sharing more than I usually did. You know, after my parents passed away, it was just me and my little sister, Taryn. I began feeling a bit vulnerable. I had to grow up fast to take care of both of us. Everything revolved around making sure she was okay. Her schooling, her life, it all depended on me. Keaton turned to me, his face serious. That's a lot, Bryn. You took on so much. Yeah, sometimes it feels that way, I admitted softly. But you do what you have to, right? You make sacrifices. Keaton nodded, looking at me with a newfound respect. It sounds like you've been through a lot. More than most people could handle. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly seen. There was something about Keaton's understanding that made the weight I carried feel a little lighter. He wasn't just another guest. He was someone who understood the ups and downs of life on a level most people didn't. We spent hours that night, just sitting in that cozy bar, talking about life, regrets, dreams, and everything in between. What started as a difficult day ended in a deep conversation, a connection that neither of us expected but both needed. And in that little corner of the world, surrounded by the hum of a bar filled with strangers, I realized that sometimes the people you least expect can make the biggest impact on your life. Life can be tough, but you deal with what you're given. I shrugged, trying to lighten the mood. It's just the hand I was dealt, I said with a small smile. Keaton looked at me, his face softening. You've done really well for yourself, Bryn. Running a hotel, keeping everything together. I let out a genuine laugh. Yeah, I guess so. Managing the hotel, covering bills, making sure Taryn had as normal a life as possible. He leaned in, his expression sincere. You're remarkable. You know that? I playfully swatted his arm, brushing off the compliment. Oh, stop it. But inside, his words made me feel warm, like he really saw me. So, what about you? I asked, steering the conversation back to him. Ever think about having a family? Keaton shifted, looking a bit uneasy. Family? That's a tricky one. Let's just say my parents and we don't exactly see eye to eye. They've got their empire, and I've got my life on the road. An empire, huh? I teased, nudging his shoulder. Sounds impressive. He smiled faintly. Not as glamorous as it sounds, just a lot of expectations and a sense of being tied down. We talked for hours that night, sharing stories, secrets, and dreams. It felt like those walls he'd kept up were finally coming down. Time slipped away, and it wasn't until the bartender started stacking chairs that we realized how late it had gotten. Things with Keaton felt right, but he still held back when it came to big, future talks. He seemed unsure where we stood until one evening when everything changed. I had invited him over for dinner. It was his first real glimpse into my life, beyond just picking me up for dates. He looked around my apartment, admiring the cozy decor. This place is beautiful, Bryn. Honestly, I didn't expect this, he said, sounding genuinely impressed. What did you think? I laughed, spreading my arms. That I lived in some tiny, rundown place? He chuckled. I guess I just didn't picture you here. But it suits you. My parents' passing left us in a decent financial spot, I explained. We sold their house, and I bought this apartment for Taryn and me. I made the first payment, and now it's mine. Keaton nodded, his respect clear. You've done incredibly well for yourself, Bryn. Really well. We spent the rest of the evening together, relaxed and content. After dinner, we moved to the couch with a bottle of wine. That's when he took a deep breath, looking at me with an intensity one hadn't seen before. Bryn, he began, holding my hand tightly. I've been doing a lot of thinking about us. My heart began to race. Oh. And what have you been thinking? He held my gaze, his voice steady. I love you, Bryn. I know I said I wasn't looking to settle down, but with you it's different. I can't picture being anywhere but here, with you. His words washed over me like a wave. Just a few weeks ago, he seemed so against any kind of commitment, and now he was talking about a future together. I looked into his eyes, seeing the seriousness there. Are you sure, Keaton? This isn't just something you're feeling in the moment. He shook his head, squeezing my hand. I've never been more certain about anything. Bryn, will you marry me? The question hung in the air, full of meaning. My mind raced, but my heart already knew the answer. Before I could think twice, I heard myself say, yes, I'll marry you. A couple of weeks later, Keaton surprised me with a beautiful ring, simple but elegant. It felt like a dream, like I'd stepped into a world I never wanted to leave. Keaton's excitement about our future was infectious, and he dove into wedding plans right away. You deserve something amazing, Bryn. Let's have a wedding no one will ever forget, he said one night as we looked over budgets and venue options. Then he suggested a financial plan. Since I have the contacts and experience, I can handle all the arrangements. If you can set aside, say, $40,000, I'll take care of everything. And for the honeymoon, I'll book us into the most luxurious hotel in the world. I hesitated. The amount was steep, but he seemed so confident and assured. He promised to handle the details, insisting this wedding would be something extraordinary. I was swept up in the excitement, ready to take that leap into a life I never thought possible after Keaton suggested we'd get a house together. My heart filled with excitement, though the amount he asked me to contribute made me pause. It was almost everything I had saved. But seeing his enthusiasm, I pushed my doubts aside. Okay, if you think it's best, I trust you, Keaton. I transferred the money to his account, and he took over all the planning. Watching him dive into the arrangements with such care made me feel lucky. Here's a man who'd entered my life unexpectedly and now felt like he'd always been a part of it. Every night, I went to bed with a smile, thinking about how perfect everything seemed. As the wedding plans came together, I thought it was finally time for Keaton to meet my sister, Taryn. She was my only family, and her opinion mattered, even though she could sometimes be a bit overwhelming. We decided to meet at the local diner where Taryn worked as a waitress. As we walked in, the little bell above the door jingled, and Taryn spotted us immediately, her face lighting up. "Hey, sis," she called out, waving us over. Her eyes shifted to Keaton, giving him a playful once-over. "And you must be the famous fiancé I've heard all about." Keaton flashed his charming smile and extended his hand. "And you must be the beautiful sister I've heard so much about. You two could be twins." I rolled my eyes, feeling a mix of pride and embarrassment. "All right, cut it out," I said, smirking. Taryn laughed, leaning in with a mischievous grin. "So, Keaton, are you as rich as they say?" She knew just how to push my buttons, but Keaton took it in stride, laughing along. "Well, I've done all right," he said with a shrug. "But Bryn's right, it's not about money. It's the love that counts." Taryn raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "Smooth talker, huh? I like him." Over the next few weeks, Keaton continued to be the perfect gentleman. He was attentive, thoughtful, and always made me feel like the most important person in his life. He even brushed off Taryn's occasional teasing and flirtatious comments, which was a relief. As the wedding plans became more intense, I couldn't have asked for a better partner. One day, I went to a bridal shop with my best friend, Zella, to find my wedding dress. The store was filled with beautiful silk and satin gowns, a dream come true. As I was being zipped into a dress, the reality of everything hit me. I was really getting married. Just then, I heard a familiar laugh from the next fitting booth. Curious, I peeked around the curtain and saw Taryn twirling in front of a mirror in a wedding dress. "Taryn, what are you doing in a wedding dress?" I asked, surprised. She stopped, giving me a crooked smile. "Oh, just trying some stuff on, for fun." Zella joined us, chuckling. "Looks like someone's caught the wedding fever." Taryn's laugh was a bit forced. "Yeah, something like that. Let's just say I might need one sooner than you think." I looked at her, half amused and half worried. "Wait, are you serious? Is there something you need to tell me?" She waved it off with a casual smile. "Just let it be a surprise." We all laughed, thinking she was just being her usual dramatic self, and I turned back to focus on my big day. But the sight of Taryn in that dress stayed in my mind, lingering as a strange feeling I couldn't quite shake off. The morning of that day started like any other until it didn't. After breakfast, Keaton left in a rush, mentioning an important meeting he couldn't miss. He accidentally left his phone on the coffee table, and shortly after he left, it began buzzing continuously. At first, I brushed it off, assuming it was work-related or maybe a friend checking in. But as the buzzing continued, curiosity got the better of me. I picked up the phone, expecting nothing unusual. There was no password, which I thought was odd, given how organized he was with everything else. That should have been my first clue. As the screen lit up, I noticed that all the messages were from one contact, Taryn Banana. My heart sank a little. Why was he texting my sister so much? Maybe they were planning a surprise for the wedding? I tried to shake off my nerves, telling myself I was overreacting. But I couldn't resist. I opened the messages, and what I saw felt like a punch to the stomach. "I can't wait to be with you forever," Taryn had written. "Forget Bryn. It's you." I wanted nothing more than to stand up there, side by side with Keaton, the man I was about to marry. But the truth was painfully clear, flashing in every message I'd read. "Soon, love," he had replied to Taryn. "Just need to play along a little longer." She's so clueless, it's almost funny. Each text cut deeper than the last. They were talking about the wedding, about me, about how they'd use my money to start their lives together, and then cast me aside. And the final blow. Taryn was pregnant with Keaton's baby. The room spun and I felt sick. My baby sister, the one I'd raised and cared for, was betraying me. And Keaton, the man who had promised to stand by me forever, was right beside her, planning to rip my life apart. An hour later, Keaton came back, looking relaxed. "Hey, babe, have you seen my phone?" he asked, leaning in to kiss my cheek like nothing was wrong. I forced a smile and handed it to him, channeling all my years of customer service training into that one look. "You left it here," I said sweetly. "Careful. You're slipping, leaving your lifeline behind." He took the phone, chuckling as he checked his messages, oblivious to the firestorm brewing inside me. He laughed at something on the screen, and I felt my fists clench. Asterisk laugh it up, Keaton. Enjoy it while you can, asterisk. That night, as we lay in bed, he was all smiles, talking about our future. "It's going to be perfect, Bryn. This wedding. Our life together, you'll see." I turned to him, my heart torn between love and the raw sting of betrayal. "I'm sure it will be," I murmured, letting him pull me close as he drifted off to sleep. But as he slept peacefully, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I wasn't going to be the victim here. If they wanted a show, I would give them one they'd never forget. But first, I had to play the part of the loving fiancé just a little longer. The day of the wedding arrived, and with it, the performance of a lifetime. The grand hall was filled with flowers, and guests murmured in excitement, completely unaware of the drama about to unfold. Just as we were about to exchange vows, the hall doors flew open. Taryn, wearing a wedding dress, marched down the aisle as if she owned the place. Guests gasped and turned to watch as she stormed down the aisle, her eyes fixed on us. She stopped in front of us, pushing me aside with a dramatic flair. "I'm the one who deserves to be here, not you, Bryn," she declared loudly. "I'm having his babies." She turned to Keaton, demanding, "Tell her. Tell everyone." Keaton let go of my hand, and a twisted smile spread across his face as he laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed through the hall. "Thanks, Bryn, for setting up this beautiful wedding. It's perfect for me and your sister." Gasps rippled through the crowd as shock registered on every face. He looked at me, smug. "Why don't you take a seat, Bryn? Enjoy the show as a guest." His words were meant to hurt, but I just smiled, calm and composed. "Of course," I replied, my voice steady. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." Their smug smiles wavered, confusion flickering in their eyes as I stepped back and took a seat, crossing my legs and settling in to watch the mess unfold. As Keaton and Taryn faced the priest to begin their vows, another interruption sent shockwaves through the room. A woman, older and visibly furious, stormed down the aisle. "Keaton," she shouted, making him go pale. "You lying, cheating scumbag." The room fell silent as Keaton's fake smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure panic. The woman faced the guests, her voice shaking with rage. "I'm his wife," she announced, glaring at Keaton and the mother of his child. He conveniently forgot to mention that part, along with the vows he made to me. Taryn's face turned ghostly white, and her legs wobbled as she looked from Keaton to the woman and then to me, silently pleading for help. I stood up, my voice calm and clear. "Well, Keaton, looks like you've made quite the mess. Perhaps now everyone can see who you truly are. I have a surprise for everyone, too," I announced, each word sharp and clear. "Keaton isn't just a cheater, he's broke. A private investigator confirmed he's drowning in debt, his investments have failed, and worst of all, he's been stealing from his own family." The room erupted in whispers, a hum of scandal and shock filling the air. Keaton's wife turned her fury on Taryn. "And you," she spat, advancing on her. "How dare you?" Taryn stumbled back, her face wet with tears. I watched with a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. After weeks of pain and planning, watching everything unravel felt like justice. But it also left a hollow ache inside me. Keaton's wife continued, her voice cutting. "He's left us with nothing. And you think he's going to build a life with you? Wake up, girl." Taryn's dreams of a perfect wedding had become a nightmare. She stood there, sobbing, her face flushed with shame and despair. Keaton tried to speak, attempting to salvage what little was left, but his wife's open palm came down hard across his face. The sharp slap echoed through the hall, leaving the guests in stunned silence. As if that wasn't enough, another interruption broke the tense quiet. Keaton's parents entered the hall, their faces marked by shock and anger. His father, a stern man in a tailored suit, scanned the room with a look of deep disappointment. He was the first to speak, his voice booming over the murmurs of the crowd. "I am utterly ashamed of you, Keaton." His gaze locked onto his son, as if to burn his disappointment into Keaton's soul. Keaton's mother, a frail woman clutching a handkerchief, had tears streaming down her face. "My son," she sobbed, "how could you? This is not how we raised you. Deceiving these women, it's unforgivable." Keaton stood frozen, his usual charm stripped away, crushed beneath his family's public disapproval. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but his father cut him off, his tone cold and final. "You are no longer part of this family's legacy. Consider yourself, without an inheritance." The room burst into chaos once more, guests pulling out their phones to capture every second of the spectacle that had turned what was supposed to be my wedding into a public downfall. In the weeks that followed, I decided to take legal action against Keaton. I filed a lawsuit to reclaim the $40,000 I had given him for the wedding, and the evidence was overwhelmingly in my favor. The judge ruled that Keaton had to repay every penny. Not long after, his wife filed her own suit, seeking compensation for emotional distress, deception, and alimony for their daughter. I attended every court session, feeling a strange, bittersweet satisfaction as I watched Keaton face the consequences of his actions. Surprisingly, Taryn remained by his side, supporting the very man who had nearly destroyed me. One day, outside the courtroom, Taryn confronted me. "He loves me, Bryn, and I love him. We're going to get through this, no matter what anyone thinks," she said, her voice shaky but determined. I looked at her, struggling to recognize the sister I had once loved and protected. Now, she felt like a stranger. "Love? You call this love?" I replied, my voice laced with disbelief.
"He used us both, Taryn."
"Open your eyes, he's a liar." But she shook her head, her voice trembling as she clung to her fantasy. "He'll change for me. You just couldn't see the good in him." A cold, hollow laugh escaped me. "Good? There's no good in him, Taryn. He's a con artist, and you're just another one of his victims." As I walked away, the weight of everything that had happened pressed down on me. The lies, the betrayal, the court battles, they'd taken a toll. But strangely, I felt a sense of closure. The man who'd promised to love me had shown his true colors, and I had exposed him for the world to see. The final chapter with Keaton didn't end dramatically, but quietly. He left town, slipping away in the night, leaving behind a trail of broken promises and unpaid debts. Before he vanished, he managed to settle his debts with me and his legal wife, perhaps thinking that might erase the damage. But the real wreckage was what he left with Taryn, my sister, who now bore the weight of his lies. And as life returned to normal, I finally felt ready to rebuild. I had been bruised, but not broken. The experience had left scars, but also taught me the power of truth and resilience. Though my heart had been shattered, I knew I'd emerge stronger. Leaving Keaton and Taryn to live with the choices they had made, Taryn was alone now and pregnant. A few weeks after Keaton disappeared, she showed up at my apartment. It was the first time we'd seen each other since that chaotic scene at the courthouse. She stood in the doorway, looking like a shadow of the confident, carefree sister I once knew. Her head hung low, her voice trembling as she said, "Bryn, I need help. He left me, and I'm going to have his baby. I have nothing." The old me, the sister who'd raised and cared for her, might have opened the door without a second thought. But too much had happened, too much had broken. You have the apartment, and you'll have the baby. That's a start. You're not on the streets, Taryn, and you're not helpless. Her eyes filled with desperation. But I don't have any money, Bryn. The bills, the baby. I need help. I shook my head, the decision firm in my heart, even though it hurt to see her like this. You made your choice, Taryn. Now you have another choice, to figure it out just like I had to after Mom and Dad died, and just like I had to after you betrayed me. Taryn broke down, covering her face with her hands, her whole body trembling. I never meant to hurt you. I thought I was in love. I really did. Love doesn't make you betray your family, Taryn. Love doesn't make you stand by while I'm humiliated. You didn't love me enough to stay away from him or to tell me the truth before everything fell apart. She looked up, her face streaked with tears, her eyes pleading. So that's it? You're just going to turn me away? Yes, I replied, my voice steady. That's it. You're going to walk away from here and take care of your child, just like I took care of you. I turned back and closed the door, the sound of it shutting out her cries as they echoed down the hall. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it felt necessary. After that day, life slowly returned to a peaceful normal I hadn't realized I'd missed. I threw myself into my work, picked up old hobbies I'd set aside, and rebuilt the independence that had always been part of me. As for Taryn, I heard from mutual friends that she'd had her baby, a little girl. They said she was managing, that she was getting by. I sincerely hoped she found her way, finding strength in motherhood, the strength she'd never quite found as my sister.